Did you know that Rimmel became a generic word for mascara in multiple languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, Turkish, Persian, and Greek? Welcome to the Cosmetic Chronicles, the podcast where history meets beauty and tells the amazing stories behind some of the world's most notorious brands. I'm your host, Sarah Carvalho, and I'm a beauty journalist who has been obsessed with makeup since my first swipe of mascara. In this episode, we're covering Rimmel, the cool kid UK brand that actually began much earlier than I think people realize. Began back in 1834. I think it makes it the oldest makeup brand that we've covered here on this podcast. As always, we'll start with a little Sarah story. So for me, Rimmel was always kind of London, UK cool vibes. And I think it was because Kate Moss was the spokesperson when I was a teen. And I just always loved the affordability of Rimmel, but also it just felt like it just had a cool edge to it. And for me, Scandalized mascara was the big one. I loved mascara. Mascara is my favorite product to try, and the Scandalize mascara in particular, which I have here in the orange tube. I haven't bought it in ages, so it was really fun to get to buy it again. And the Get the London look vibe of Rimmel was definitely something that felt unique in the drugstore. I didn't feel like there was really anything else that had that kind of British edge. And then when I moved to London, there was just so much more availability of Rimmel because that was its home base. And that's when I really got more into the lipstick, but also their nail polish. I think their nail polish is very underrated. I actually was just talking to my mom today about recording this episode, and she bought one of the 60-second drying Rimmel nail polishes ages ago, and she's almost done with it, and she's devastated because she can't find the shade. I always really liked the quick drying 60-second Rimmel nail polish, but I also became obsessed with their Lycra Salon Pro nail polish, which I don't think they still have, but it still went on like nail polish, but it had this kind of consistency where it almost felt like you were pulling it over the nail, and it just had this long lasting nature to it. And this was before, I don't believe gel UV polish was a thing at that point. It felt like a very innovative, new, cutting edge nail polish lacquer. And I think I had like 5 or 6 of them that I bought when I was in London. I think they've sadly all expired and dried at this point, but that was my experience with Rimmel, was just being able to try all these different products and get to try more of them when I lived in London. I do wish that it was a little bit easier to get here in the US. I have been very fortunate, though, for this episode. The brand sent me some of their hero products, so I'm going to be playing with them over on my Instagram and also on my Substack. The links to both of those are in the show notes. But thank you so much to the brand for sending me some of those hero products. So make sure you check out that content if you want to see some of those products in action. And of course, we'll talk more about what those products are later on in the episode. But for now, let's go back to the beginning. So I'm thrilled to say that a major source for me this week is old friend of the pod, cosmeticsandskin.com. It's been a minute since they were my main resource, and I was so excited to see them pop up in my search results when I started the research. And if anyone is unfamiliar, this website is one of the most impressively researched and thorough websites on beauty history that I've found. And I just highly recommend checking them out for more information. Obviously, they're going to have much more than I'll be able to cover here, but they also have old advertisements, old images of original products. It's an incredible source. As always, they're in my show notes. So definitely go check them out, not just for Rimmel, but all the other brands that they cover. I also found a great blog post by Lisa Eldridge that helped me out a lot with this episode as well. So really, really great sources this week. So yeah, definitely wanted to shout them out at the very top of the episode. And like I said in the intro, Rimmel goes all the way back to the 1800s, 1834 to be exact. And although the brand is now synonymous with London, the story actually begins in France. Hyacinth Mars Rimmel, who I'll refer to as Rimmel Sr. throughout the rest of this episode, was a highly regarded French perfumer who learned his craft through an apprenticeship with the French fragrance house Parfum Lubin, which was founded by someone named Pierre-François Lubin in 1798. Fun fact, Lubin was also known as the personal nose to Empress Josephine. So Rimmel Sr. was working at Parfum Lubin when in 1830, this perfumery called the Delcroix Perfumery, which was located at 158 New Bond Street in London, called up Parfums Lubin looking for a successor to Joseph Delcroix, who had died back in 1826. Lubin actually recommended Rimmel Sr., who accepted the position and moved to London with his wife and his then 10-year-old son, Eugene. So Rimmel Sr. actually remained at Delcroix until 1834, so 4 years at this perfumery, when he finally established his own perfumery. This was located at 48 Albemarle Street in Piccadilly. And this date, 1834, is generally recognized as the founding of the House of Rimmel. The business then relocated to Regent Street in 1835 and then Gerrard Street in Soho in 1836. This exclusive perfumery and cosmetics boutique run by Rimmel Sr. quickly became a fashionable destination for London's elite, attracting customers seeking the latest innovations in fragrance and beauty. And while Rimmel Sr. was becoming among the most respected perfumers in London, it was actually his son Eugene who would ultimately transform the family business into a global beauty brand, but not before making a few more waves in the perfume world. So Eugene came over with his father, if you remember, at 10 years old. After spending several years working outside the company, Eugene officially joined the family business around 1839 or 1840. It was kind of hard to tell, but he was either 19 or 20 years old. He assumed control of the company in 1846 when Rimmel Sr., his father, retired to France. In 1857, he moved the House of Rimmel to 96 Strand in Westminster. And by this point, 1857, he had already created a reputation for being very innovative, thanks in part to a perfume fountain that he created for the Great Exhibition in 1851, which just helped make the Rimmel name more well-known throughout Britain, not just London. Rimmel's status increased even further after he published his Book of Perfumes in 1864, the same year that he opened another shop in the West End. It was one of the first modern beauty Bibles to kind of document the allure of fragrance and the etiquette of beauty and how to wear fragrance. And then following that first book, he later wrote a perfumed almanac. He also wrote a book called Recollections of the Paris Exhibition of 1867 and a Victorian bestseller called Scented Valentines. So he was rapidly growing the Rimmel name throughout London and Britain, and also just becoming a well-known innovative entrepreneur. And again, keep in mind, Rimmel at this point is still mainly a perfumery. And then when it comes to manufacturing, Rimmel didn't forget about his French roots. The company decided to maintain flower gardens and a distillery in Nice, where his father had retired. Products from Nice would have been combined with others from Grasse and elsewhere to create Rimmel's floral fragrances before being shipped through their export manufacturing. Many of Rimmel's lines were cheaper to manufacture in France than they were in Britain. And so even after they had to pay any kind of duties or tariffs, they still found it to be more cost effective, and this kept the French part of their business busy and active. So in addition to manufacturing their perfumes and then later soaps and anything else kind of in that fragrance category, Rimmel also became known for turning out large ranges of paper products that were all scented with Rimmel perfumes. So for example, they would make almanacs, they would make little cards for Valentine's Day. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen of one of the Valentines because they're incredibly ornate and everything would be kind of created as a wide range of novelties that could be used as gifts for Valentine's Day, Easter, Christmas, and other notable occasions. So journalist Percy Russell actually visited Rimmel's Strand factory in 1874, and here's what he had to say about observing these Valentines being created. Quote, "A girl begins with a simple sheet of white paper with a lace border. Her tools are few: scissors, a pair of small steel pincers, a gum bottle and brush, and an abundance of separate sheets of flowers, foliage, and all that you see in the stockroom suffice to produce what is often the most exquisite of tangible and inarticulate poetry. A rose is attached to the center, a brooding bird is added, and a framework of blossoms gummed to the edges one by one. In a comparatively small valentine, I counted 70 rosebuds, everyone being separately fixed, a task that, unless seen, one would say no human fingers could be delicate enough to accomplish." End quote. The company also scented programs on silk for a number of London theaters and also created scented fans for ladies to use at the opera, theater, or ballet. Some of the theaters also scented their auditoriums with Rimmel perfumes using something called a Rimmel aromatic dispenser, which used steam vaporization to release floral fragrances into the air. Isn't that wild? Rimmel also recommended these dispensers for disinfecting the air in hospitals, sick rooms, and other places after substituting essential oils like rosemary and lavender for the floral fragrances. So basically, everywhere you went in London, Rimmel scents were just being pumped into the air, were being feathered into your face. It's no wonder they were becoming, if not the most popular perfumery in Britain. So while he clearly conquered the perfume world, cosmetics were still somewhat on the back burner for the House of Rimmel. So from the 1830s through the 1850s or so, they did produce a range of cosmetic and toiletry products, expanding into hair darkeners, eye preparations, cold creams, some rouges, some powders, and other color cosmetics. But these were often extensions of fragrance lines rather than like a standalone beauty category. So for example, he had a Tilia fragrance that became an entire ecosystem. They had it in soap, toilet water, pomade, hair oil, cold cream, shaving soap, and even rice powder, all perfumed with that same scent. And it wasn't really until around 1860 that Rimmel broke through with a little product known as Cosmetic Superfin, often cited as one of the earliest commercially successful mascara-like products. I'm going to say mascara-like because it wasn't actually promoted as a mascara quite yet. Superfin was a darkening cosmetic made from ingredients like carbon or coal dust combined with a petroleum-based base like petroleum jelly. It was marketed as a safer alternative to the homemade lash and brow darkeners that women were already making themselves from things like soot, ash, lamp black, and other improvised and often irritating ingredients. And if you listen to the very first episode of this podcast where we covered Maybelline, it's very similar to what eventually came out of a small kitchen in Chicago a few decades later, where you kind of see that do-it-yourself to commercial pipeline emerging. But at this point, decades before Maybelline would come out with Lash Brow-ine, this was kind of the first non-toxic darkener that existed. And it wasn't mascara in the modern sense quite yet. It was more versatile than we would think of it today. So it was used to darken eyelashes, eyebrows, mustaches, beards, and even gray hairs. So really it was more of a universal grooming pigment than a dedicated eye product. I'm not downplaying the huge role it played in shaping what Rimmel would become. It helped establish the brand not just as a perfumery, but as a serious cosmetics innovator. And it also triggered something rare in beauty history: language takeover. In several languages, the word Rimmel eventually became synonymous with mascara itself, the way that we say Kleenex for using tissues or Band-Aids for plasters. Rimmel became just known as mascara. So following the success of Superfin, Rimmel continued experimenting with format and texture, eventually introducing Water Cosmetique, a liquid grooming preparation that signaled a shift away from the solid cake-style cosmetics towards a more refined brush-applied formulation. Still rooted in that Victorian grooming culture, but clearly pointing more towards a more modern idea of like liquid eye hair cosmetics that would eventually be the new normal in the next century of beauty. And then much later, so think early 1900s, these earlier Victorian formulations would have been refined and adapted over time. So same idea of the cake cosmetic technology, but then they would have evolved into what we now recognize as a true mascara. And so by 1917, the evolution had reached a new stage with the launch of one of the first block mascaras intended specifically for use on the eyelashes and eyebrows. So they moved from being a multi-purpose grooming product to now having a dedicated eye makeup product. By the early 1880s, the business was also increasingly operating in a more competitive field, with a growing number of perfumers and chemists entering overlapping categories of fragrance, grooming, and toiletry goods. In response, Rimmel decided to continue to widen their products across hygiene, grooming, and cosmetic adjacent products, trying to reinforce and encourage its position as a general beauty and personal care house rather than just a fragrance specialist. Eugene Rimmel died in 1887 at the age of 67. His will left his businesses to his wife, with his son Henry taking over the London businesses in particular. Rimmel's estate was finalized in 1888, and the following year, the company's assets were bought by a newly created company called Eugene Rimmel Limited. Eugene Rimmel Limited went public in 1919, and they also founded Eugene Rimmel SA in France in 1920. During the 1920s, it began showing an increased interest in the United States, which at that point was the largest market for cosmetics. It contracted Scales and Listener Incorporated to distribute Rimmel products in America and increase its advertising there after 1924. The main products that were advertised by Rimmel in Britain during the 1920s included their Hebe Bloom Cream, their Creme Merrimont, and Water Cosmetic, all products that had been, in one way or another, around for many years already. At this point, however, the brand started to deal with some significant financial issues. They had made some profit in 1930, but registered a net loss of 13,122 British pounds in 1931 and 9,539 British pounds in 1932. And then in the year ending 1938, Rimmel made a net trading loss of 3,519 pounds, which brought its total trading loss to almost 50,000 pounds. And this also included $2,500 in unpaid rent, even after the company had abandoned its store on Regent Street. And it eventually went into something called receivership in 1940. Now, if you're like me and you don't know the difference between, or didn't know the difference between receivership and bankruptcy, let me read this helpful guide that I found from Investopedia. So the definition of receivership is that it is a legal process in which a court appoints a receiver to manage a company's assets and operations, usually to ensure stability and recover value for creditors during financial distress. So it allows creditors to recover funds and also assists companies in restructuring to avoid bankruptcy. So the receiver is a neutral party that oversees the assets and operations to help them recover financially. And it's not the same as bankruptcy because it's not a legal proceeding, but it often occurs alongside legal disputes involving secured creditors. So in 1943, 3 years after Rimmel went into receivership, the business was formally restructured under new ownership with the creation of Rimmel Holdings Limited and Rimmel Distributors Limited, which acquired the company's British assets. And by 1946, with wartime disruption obviously still being very fresh, the company opened a new factory in Acton. Their original Hackney site had been bombed during the war, so this kind of marked an industrial reset for the brand in post-war London. But despite everything that was happening, the restructuring, the reorganization, the moving of factories, Rimmel was still manufacturing a wide range of cosmetics. They had moved into lipsticks, different face powders, different mascaras, soaps, and creams. One of the standout products at this time was called the Rimmel Beauty Cake, which was available in 7 shades, alongside the Eye Cosmetic in 3 shades. The following year, they added the Lip Brush Rouge in multiple tones, continuing the push back into color cosmetics. And then in 1948, Rimmel introduced the Lip Fashion Pencil. This was a long, slim lipstick housed in a gold-toned case, and it was offered in 10 shades. This was part of what was a wider industry shift at that time towards more portable, modern lipstick formats. And a year later, they extended the idea further with a double-ended version, offering 2 shades in one for daytime and one at nighttime. I love this idea. The day to night has always been a makeup marketing thing, and I just love that they did this in 1948 with a lipstick. In 1950, that same concept evolved into a broader night and day range, which included perfumes and face powders designed as paired products for different times of day. Love it. Bring that back, Rimmel. I think that's such a fun idea. And despite this production, these new products hitting the market that were doing really well, the business still wasn't quite financially stable at this point. The new owners were struggling, and by 1950, they had informed their advertising executive, Robert Kaplan, that they could no longer cover outstanding debts owed to their agency. At this point, Rimmel should have technically gone into administration, but instead, Robert Kaplan decided to take over the company himself in 1951. This was a really important decision. He brought his sister, Rose Glazer, into the business, and together they would end up reshaping Rimmel entirely. Neither of them actually came from the cosmetics industry at all, and at first, they tried to position Rimmel as a more upmarket, elegant brand. In 1952, they even opened a Rimmel salon in Park Lane, London, it's a very very bougie part of London, and they repackaged products into more refined, premium-looking designs. And this included a new waterproof, non-smudging cake mascara, which would be later known as French mascara. But the upmarket strategy didn't really land. What did work was actually something that happened kind of by accident in the exact opposite direction. So in 1953, Rose Glazer realized she needed products for the Lewis's Beauty Fair in Manchester. And almost out of necessity, she decided to create a small set of low-priced cosmetic packs that were going to be sold at 1 shilling and 3 pence. The idea was really simple: compact, affordable essentials displayed on serving trays. It was a very scrappy last-minute decision, but it completely changed the trajectory of the brand. Here's an excerpt that I found from the trade publication Chemist and Druggist, which I will be using a few more times in this episode. What a great source. But here's what they had to say about this decision by Rose. Quote, Mrs. Glazer, in last-minute desperation, hit on an idea that laid the foundations of the present Rimmel small packs, ticketed at a famous 1 shilling 3 pence and displayed on a tray. Within 10 days, packs of 6 basic products were ready: lipstick, liquid makeup, powder, eyeshadow cream, eyeshadow stick, and eye beauty pencil. Supplies calculated to last the whole week were taken to the fair and were sold in the first day, to such incredulity from all, including the authorities at Lewis's, that the takings were counted 3 times before the total figure was accepted. The production line then had to swing into emergency action and was just able to keep the pace with demand, the contingent in Manchester taking delivery of a fresh consignment every day by passenger train, end quote. So within days, they had created these 6 core products that I listed, and demand was so immediate and so unexpectedly strong that the organizers had to recheck the sales numbers multiple times before they were allowed to actually leave. So this response really forced a complete rethink of how Rimmel was going to be sold moving forward. So from there, production scaled rapidly to support what would become the first self-service tray system, which was initially introduced more widely in 1955. So these trays offered trial-size versions of core products, making Rimmel one of the early brands to really embrace a more modern self-select retail model. As the idea proved successful, the company gradually phased out its more traditional product sets and restructured around what would become known as beauty on a budget range. The logic was really simple with this: lower margins per item, but significantly higher volume, reduced packaging costs, and a much faster turnover. By 1958, their beauty on a budget tray had expanded into a full 12 product system, covering everything from hand creams and foundations to mascaras, powders, eyeliners, colognes, and deodorants. Interestingly, fragrance became one of the more weaker performers in this format, and both perfumes and liquid colognes were eventually dropped from the tray by the end of the 1950s. Oh, the irony, right? And Rimmel's success with this model would eventually attract the attention of Charles Sweeney of the Sanitas Trust, who ended up acquiring the company in 1961 for £550,000, part cash, part shares. Sweeney became the chairman, while Robert Kaplan remained on as deputy chairman, and Rose Glazer stayed on as managing director. Interestingly, Glazer would remain with Rimmel until 1983, and after leaving, she would go on to work with Revlon, where she helped shape the relaunch of its Charlie Color cosmetics line, using in part the same tray dispenser approach that she had pioneered at Rimmel. In 1962, Rimmel Limited acquired Rimmel's French business, and the French and British businesses would come together as Rimmel International, which was founded in 1968. In 1972, Rimmel International was sold to the International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation, ITT. This was part of a much broader corporate trend at that time when conglomerates were really snapping up consumer brands outside of what was their core industry. So at this point, ITT owned everything from hotels and insurance companies to manufacturing businesses. And so beauty was just one piece of a much larger portfolio. And then 8 years later, in 1980, ITT sold Rimmel to the pharmaceutical company Schering Plough. This may sound like an odd fit, but again, wasn't unusual at that time. Pharmaceutical companies were frequently owning and buying and acquiring beauty and personal care brands. Schering-Plough already had consumer divisions that included products like sunscreen and cosmetics, including Maybelline. For a small period of time, Rimmel and Maybelline were owned by the same company. Things got even more interesting when Unilever purchased Rimmel from Schering-Plough in 1989 as part of a broader push into beauty and personal care acquisitions. So at this time, Unilever was actively building a larger beauty portfolio and had acquired brands like Calvin Klein Cosmetics, Fabergé, and Elizabeth Arden. And then under Unilever, from 1989 to 1996, Rimmel began moving toward the identity that we recognize more today. So stronger emphasis on mass market and color cosmetics, increased international distribution, repositioning towards a more younger consumer, and laying the groundwork for what would later be known as their London look identity. Then, last in the acquisition line here, in 1996, Unilever sold Rimmel to major beauty conglomerate Coty, which proved to be the brand's most transformative modern acquisition. Under Coty, Rimmel doubled down on color cosmetics, celebrity campaigns, and eventually created its now iconic Get the London Look slogan. By the mid-1990s, the House of Rimmel had already lived several lives. The company had survived the death of its founder, had expanded internationally, became synonymous with mascara in several languages, and then spent much of the 20th century being passed between a series of corporate owners, from ITT to Schering-Plough to Unilever. But then in 1996, Rimmel entered what might be considered its modern era. That year, the brand was acquired by Coty, a move that would fundamentally reshape its identity for a new generation of consumers. Because by the 1990s, keep in mind, the world of beauty looked nothing like the one Eugene Rimmel had known. Department stores had given way to drugstore aisles, consumers wanted trend-driven products at affordable prices, and increasingly, beauty was becoming intertwined with celebrity culture specifically. So under Coty, Rimmel began to reposition itself not as a heritage perfumery with Victorian roots, but as an accessible, fashion-forward color cosmetics brand with a distinctly British point of view. And the first major step into this new identity came in 2001 when Rimmel signed supermodel Kate Moss as a spokesperson. It's hard to overstate how perfect this partnership was, especially because Rimmel was looking to rebrand in a way that was so perfectly Kate Moss coded. Kate Moss embodied everything the brand wanted to become: effortlessly cool, a little rebellious, glamorous without having to try very hard, and undeniably British. The partnership would actually last for more than 15 years, making Moss one of the longest running celebrity ambassadors in beauty history. It was also during this era that Rimmel truly embraced the slogan that would define the brand for decades to come: Get the London Look. I couldn't find much information on any history behind the slogan, except that someone thinks that it was inspired by a song called The London Look by 1960s pop band Herman's Hermits, but I have no further information on that. If you know, let me know. If you created that slogan, you leave me a comment and you tell me. The London Look was not the Victorian London look, perfumed fans and opera houses. This was modern London, fashion week, rock and roll style, supermodel, street style, red lips, smudgy eyeliner. Rimmel was selling attitude as much as makeup at this point. And then throughout the 2000s, the company doubled down on color cosmetics and began producing a number of products that would become drugstore staples and hero products. So, for example, their Lasting Finish lipstick franchise is the first one that comes to mind. Kate Moss helped launch this line and later came out with her own collection of shades, while mascaras like Sexy Curves and later Glam Eyes reinforced Rimmel's position in the category that defined its history, right? In 2009, another British model joined the family, Georgia May Jagger, daughter of Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall. With her famous gap-toothed smile and rock and roll pedigree, she became one of the defining faces of Rimmel during the 2010s. It was also during that era where one of Rimmel's most iconic modern products came into its own, the Stay Matte Pressed Powder. Already on the shelves by the late 2000s, the powder became a cult favorite during the rise of beauty blogs and YouTube in the late 2000s and early 2010s. So the mattifying look was becoming more popular, and the Stay Matte powder was particularly a fan favorite. Even when I was doing research for this episode, the amount of people that talk about how often they repurchase this powder is another Reddit rabbit hole, and people absolutely adore this powder even to this day. So at that time, it was full coverage foundation, long wear, shine control. That was the ultimate beauty goal. So Stay Matte was everywhere. The compact of pressed powder earned a devoted following thanks to its affordable price point and surprisingly effective oil control, becoming a staple in makeup bags and a fixture in many best drugstore makeup YouTube videos. The success of the powder eventually grew into an entire Stay Matte franchise with the launch of products including the Stay Matte Primer, the Stay Matte Foundation, which I have here and am wearing, the Stay Matte Concealer, and the Stay Matte Liquid Lip Color. I am also wearing the Stay Matte pressed powder currently as well. It's lovely. And the following decade saw the company lean even further into trend-driven beauty. The launch of their Scandal Eyes mascara. Again, this one, my old friend. They now have many different Scandal Eyes, but this is the original Scandal Eyes Volume Lash. This expanded the brand's already strong mascara portfolio. They also came out with products like their Stay Glossy Lip Gloss, which was an affordable favorite among many younger consumers. And then I think one of Rimmel's biggest hits of the 2010s was their Apocalypse Lip Lacquer. This was launched in 2013, and the product arrived just before liquid lipsticks were starting to take over. It combined the shine of a gloss with the pigment of a lipstick, and it felt modern, exciting, ahead of its time. Again, that seemed to be something Rimmel's been known for, starting from Eugene, kind of this idea of being a little ahead of its time, thinking outside the box a little bit. And a year later, after launching to lots of fanfare, Rimmel followed with Provocalypse, which was a long-wearing liquid lip color that quickly developed a devoted following. In 2016, Cara Delevingne joined the brand, continuing Rimmel's long tradition of partnering with those British-style icons. And then over the years, the company would also work with cool figures like Rita Ora, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, and Lily Cole, all reinforcing the same message. Rimmel was selling the cool, confident spirit of London itself. And then in the early 2020s, the brand underwent another evolution of sorts. So this was a time where consumer interest was shifting towards sustainability, clean, transparency, more ingredient conscious formulations. So Rimmel decided to launch Kind and Free. I have one of the products here. This was a vegan collection featuring foundations, powders, lip products, cheap products made with a focus on naturally derived ingredients and recycled packaging. The range marked a significant departure from the full coverage ultimate trends that were kind of dominating the previous years. And they leaned into that skin first approach to beauty that was very on trend at the time. The collection grew to include a moisturizing skin tint foundation, which I could not find in the US, which was devastating because I've heard such great things about it. But they also came out with a concealer, pressed powder. This is the multi-stick for lips and cheeks in this beautiful pink shade. Clean eye definer. I'm wearing a purple eyeliner today that is Kind and Free. It's hard to see here, but you'll see it on Instagram. A mascara, tinted lip balm, and even a nail polish. So this was one of the brand's most comprehensive launches in years. And that really brings us to today, where Rimmel continues to launch products that reflect the contemporary beauty trends while still having some of those hero products always available. So some of these newer products include their multitasker products, their lasting mega matte liquid lipstick, and what is now my current favorite, the Oh My Gloss Butter Me Up Makeup Skincare Hybrid Lip Balm, which I have been wearing this entire time. It is beautiful. She's coming in my bag with me. And while Rimmel remains a beloved and highly recognizable drugstore brand in the UK and across many international markets, it has been noticeably smaller in the US over the years. At least when I go to the drugstore, it doesn't seem to take up as much space on the shelf as it used to. And I'm sure there's a million reasons for that. It probably just does better internationally. Coty, their parent brand, also owns CoverGirl, which I feel like is not a direct competitor in a sense, because I feel like the target consumer is different. But I don't know enough info. I don't work there. I don't know. But I'm sure there's many reasons for that. But I hope that they just continue to release new products here in the US. I hope that we start getting more products. Some of the really innovative products that are released in the UK, I hope come here at some point. But obviously they will continue to innovate and continue to grow. They have such an incredibly rich history. And I think that while the products may have changed and the faces of the campaigns might be different and the company has, gone through different corporate hands, their core idea remains the same. We talk about this a lot on the podcast where there are some brands whose core identity never changes, and there's some that try to change to match what's going on. And I think Rimmel's core identity has always remained the same. Beauty should be fashionable, it should be accessible, and just a little bit ahead of the time. All right, so we made it to the rabbit hole of the week. It is a long episode this week. I guess that's what happens when you have a brand that started in 1830s. So the rabbit hole of the week, if you're new here, is just when I talk about some rabbit hole I fell down when I was doing research for the episode. And this week, I was fascinated by the idea of a perfume fountain. So that's today's rabbit hole. So like I mentioned way back in the beginning, days ago, this Rimmel perfume fountain was held at the Great Exhibition of 1851. Now, for some context, I turned to the London Museum. They had a great article on this exhibition. They also have several objects related to the exhibition in their collection, including some prints and souvenirs commemorating the event. But I pulled from one of their blog posts about this so I could have a little bit more understanding of what this was. And it apparently was one of the most popular attractions in 19th century London. So it was created by Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, and civil servant Henry Cole. And the Great Exhibition was aimed to celebrate modern design and promote Britain as an industrial and imperial power. Over 100,000 products were brought from all over the world and were housed in a giant glass building that they called the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, Westminster. It was open to everyone from all classes and nationalities, and it aimed to push a positive view of the British Empire to the largest possible audience. And 6 million people visited the Great Exhibition. And for reference, 6 million was equivalent to a third of the entire population of Britain at the time. Among some of those visitors were A-listers like the authors Charles Dickens and Charlotte Bronte, my favorite Bronte sister. And some of the most popular exhibits included an iron piano frame and a stuffed elephant bearing a magnificent Indian howdah or seat. And of course, there was our fountain of perfume, one of those fascinating beauty history moments that felt surprisingly modern when we look back on it in hindsight. Eugene Rimmel essentially just created an immersive brand experience centuries before anyone had heard the term experiential marketing, right? So at the Great Exhibition, what would happen is they would have these perfume jets that were released from a central fountain. And this allowed visitors to put in their handkerchiefs or their gloves as they moved through the space and scent their belongings. So it was interactive, it was theatrical, it was deliberately designed to make fragrance something you didn't just buy, but you could experience in real time. Now, what's really interesting about this is if you listen to the Beauty Bulletin, I think it was 2 Beauty Bulletins ago, I talk about how there's a new immersive AI exhibit in LA where they use the scents of the rainforest. And it was in collaboration with L'Oreal, I want to say. And you're supposed to be able to walk through the space and have scents kind of hit you at certain times when you're looking at certain pieces of art or like drone footage of the rainforest or some, I don't remember, but it was something where it was like scent was part of the experience. Basically, that's what Eugene Rimmel did, but in 1851. He wanted people to come up to be able to put their handkerchief in to get a little whiff of perfume and to be able to just kind of have it be an immersive experience. And even by today's standards, it was a very bold marketing stunt. But in the context of the Crystal Palace, where Britain was showcasing their industrial and cultural supremacy, it also positioned Rimmel's work alongside other pieces of innovation and spectacle. So it wasn't just a commerce, retail environment. It was, look at how innovative we are here in Britain. And Rimmel was a part of that. And it worked really well. The fountain actually brought Rimmel to the attention of Queen Victoria, who became a patron of the brand and appointed him the royal perfumer, a title that would go on to carry enormous weight in Victorian society. Rimmel's perfume fountain was also used in the Exhibition of Art and Art Industry in Dublin in 1853 and in the New York Exhibition of the Industry of All Nations, which was from 1853 to 1854. So basically, this perfume fountain went on a little world tour. And over his lifetime, Eugene Rimmel would go on to hold multiple royal warrants, not just from Victoria, but from various European courts, helping cement his reputation as one of the most prominent perfumers of the 19th century and turning the Rimmel name into something synonymous with both luxury and innovation. So I'm going to end this rabbit hole. Oh, also, I'm going to put a picture up of this fountain so you can kind of see a little bit more of what it looks like if you're watching the podcast on YouTube or on Spotify. Wild innovation. I love it. So I'm going to end this rabbit hole with an excerpt from another issue of Chemist and Druggist, which is a trade publication of the time. They wrote a piece on Eugene Rimmel in February of 1874, and they talked about the impact of this perfume fountain. Quote, at the Great World's Fair in 1851, Mr. Eugene Rimmel made his first palpable hit in exhibiting a perfume fountain, which everyone remembers became one of the liens of the place. This was a novel and ingenious idea, inasmuch as it enabled the public to test the quality of the scent. This fountain attracted so much notice that when the Crystal Palace was built at Sydenham, partly out of the remains of the Great Exhibition, the directors requested Mr. Rimmel to erect 3 ornamental perfume fountains, one under each transept, conceding to him in exchange the monopoly of the sale of perfumery on the ground floor, a monopoly which he has retained until the present day. The prominent positions occupied by these fountains in a place visited by thousands of admirers from all ends of the earth have contributed greatly, no doubt, to Mr. Rimmel's business and made his name popular among all classes. End quote. All right, let's quickly run through the iconic products. Of course, starting with Cosmetic Superfin. This was one of Rimmel's earliest breakthrough cosmetics, a kohl-based darkening product used on lashes, brows, and hair, and was widely considered an early mass-market, non-toxic mascara. And we have the Water Cosmetique, which was a liquid grooming preparation that signaled an early shift away from the solid cake cosmetics towards brush or application-based beauty formats. And then in the early 1950s, they had a relaunch of the French mascara, which was an early waterproof cake mascara that helped reposition Rimmel in the emerging modern eye makeup category. The Lip Fashion Pencil was a slim portable lipstick housed in a pencil-style case, reflecting the post-war demand for convenience and modernized packaging. The Stay Matte Press Powder. Now, this was cult status in starting from the 2000s through the mid-2010s. This is a lightweight oil control powder that became a global drugstore staple during those early days of beauty blogging and YouTube, but again, still has a incredibly loyal fan following. The Lasting Finish lipstick, one of Rimmel's most enduring lip franchises, known for its affordability, but also the pigment payoff and the long wear formula. Even across multiple formulations, they still have had that long-lasting finish. The Scandal Eyes mascara, my personal favorite, a major modern mascara franchise that was built around volume, drama, and they have multiple variations, really reinforcing Rimmel's historical strength in eye products specifically. And then we have the 2 major lip launches that they had, the Apocalypse Lip Liqueur, which was a high-impact hybrid between gloss and lipstick, and then their Provocalypse 16-hour lip color, which was a 2-step lip system designed for transfer-proof wear and really reflected that time's obsession with like extreme longevity, which I can always appreciate. And then we have their Kind and Free line. So their tint foundation and concealer were particularly loved, a lightweight vegan skin tint and breathable concealer that was representing Rimmel's additional offering towards natural finish and skin first approach to makeup. Then more recently, we have the Multitasker franchise. This is Rimmel's modern complexion system built around hybrid but also multi-use products that kind of your skin but better, but also do it in less steps than you need. And these products include the Better Than Filter, which is a glow primer and highlighter designed for that filter-like finish, the Multitasker Concealer, which is a lightweight, buildable everyday concealer, and the Multitasker Bronzing Stick, which is a cream bronzer for easy sculpting and definition and also warmth. I'm wearing it today as well. It's beautiful. And in their mascara category, they've recently come out with the Wonder Bond mascara. This is a lash conditioning mascara designed to combine cosmetic performance with lash care benefits, again, reflecting the lean into the hybrid makeup skincare trend. And lastly, the Butter Me Up lip balm, the one that I'm wearing now. It's a very cushiony lip balm with a soft buttery texture, and it feels very nourishable. It's not sticky. It has a beautiful gloss, looks natural. A great addition to the Rimmel lineup. So I'm going to end with a quote from that same chemist and druggist article on Eugene Rimmel from February of 1874. This time focusing on his charitable work. I thought that would be a really nice place to end the episode. Even as it is, the tide of London life rolls over many a starving and desolate soul, and not a bubble rises to the surface to record the sorrowful story. Mr. Rimmel is one who knows this, and in the midst of his own active and prosperous career has never lost sight of those less fortunate than himself, and has devoted a great deal of his time to the charitable societies founded for their relief. Some 7 years ago, he exerted himself very earnestly in promoting the establishment of a French hospital in London, at last with complete success. From its foundation to the present time, Mr. Rimmel has continued to act as its honorary secretary and has never relaxed his effort to ensure its efficiency and economical management. In recognition of this important service, Mr. Rimmel was decorated by the French government under the high distinction of Chevalier of the Légion d'honneur. So those were the Chronicles of Rimmel. What do you think of the brand? Did you know they go way, 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 way back? Am I the only one that didn't know this? Let me know if you've tried Scandal Eyes. Let me know if you're British and you can access all the good stuff. You let me know. Definitely leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Check out the Instagram, check out the Substack for more content around using the products, what they look like on the skin. So definitely check out all the links below. And as always, please, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, to rate, to share. It really helps to push the podcast out. The algorithm is algorithming. So it's just very helpful to have those pieces of support. So thank you if you've already done it. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time on the Cosmetic Chronicles.